Hello and welcome to this Robocraft 2 guide. Robocraft 2 is in early alpha, so everything you see here might be matter to change in the future. In this video, I will talk about how to make a really strong melee weapon in Robocraft 2, so that you can destroy other robots quite easily. Look at this, what I do with the test robot here. The melee weapons you can consider kind of a one-time use weapon, or in best case scenario, two-time use weapon. But it's still very much worth it. Because if you think about it, you might have to invest between 100 to 150 CPU, maybe a tiny bit more, into these melee weapons. But you can completely remove an opponent with these melee weapons and still be left with a quite decent robot that is almost full strength that you can use to go on the offense. So let's get started talking about how to make them as good as possible. So, when making your melee weapon in Robocraft 2, of course you want it to do as much damage as possible. And one very important key factor is velocity. So, when calculating the damage from collision, it seems that Robocraft 2 takes into account velocity, and it's a major factor in how much damage stuff takes. This means that you want your weapon to be very long. And the reason for that is quite simple. Regardless of the technique you're using, hinges, or like I'm using, motorized servos, the center will always spin at the same max velocity. Which means the only way you can get it to move faster is by making the weapon longer. Because if it spins at a certain speed at the center, the further out you are from the center, the faster that part needs to move to complete the circle. So, a long melee weapon means a fast melee weapon, and that equals a lot of damage. A heavier melee weapon does not seem to do more damage. Here on this test robot I replaced my really thin blades with stacked plate armor instead. Same amount of CPU, but a lot heavier weapon. And in my test it did not seem to do more damage. It's really hard to exact test the amount of damage you do with melee weapons, since it's really hard to replicate the exact same strike over and over. But I did try several times and it actually seemed to do slightly worse, not better. On top of that, you get a heavier, meaning slower robot, and also it's a great risk of getting imbalanced during the strike due to the inertia of the melee weapons themselves. So I would say thinner is probably better. So I changed the materials of my melee weapons from Ladium, the strongest material but also the heaviest, to Arium, a much lighter material with a lot less connection strength. And the interesting thing is that I didn't do that much less damage. I would say it's kind of rather inconclusive if I actually did less damage, with the difficulties that I mentioned before to actually measuring this correctly. The reason to go for a heavier material on the melee weapons, I would say, would rather be to prevent people from being able to disarm you easily with a few plasma hits than to actually do more damage with them. I also experimented a lot with different shapes of the weapon to see if I could get more damage with different kind of spikes, etc. The only real conclusive result I got was that size matters. You want to hit the enemy robot in as many places as possible, which means like a narrow weapon or a small weapon will do a lot less damage than a big or broad weapon. Pretty much you want as many collisions as possible upon impact. So, in conclusion, you can make your melee weapon in whatever material, with whatever shape you want to. The only thing that really matters is the length of the melee weapon itself, because that equals speed at the very tip and that equals damage, and as well the size of the area that will hit the enemy robot. There might be some other things that do affect damage, like for example the shape of the weapon, but I couldn't really come to any conclusive results regarding that. Hope you find this guide useful. The robot you see in this video you can find on the CRF. It's called the Clapper. It's based on the principles in this video. Well, mostly the speed and the impact area principles, but also the ones that kind of had a hunch would make a difference. It's now, after my changes, almost on par with the starting robot in terms of weight. Especially after losing the melee weapons, I would say it's on par with the starting bot, which means it's quite agile, it's quite fast, and it's quite good at accelerating, so it will work very well to push objectives after defending with the melee weapons. It performed very well during the multiplayer test. I also made it a bit lighter and faster since that playtest. If you want to check it out, it's on the CRF. Search for The Clapper and you will find it. Hope you liked this video. Cheers!